the meeting to order. And on our agenda today is to, I think what we should do, start our initial review and eliminate some budgets from intense scrutiny, knowing where the savings could be. Do you all have a copy of that condensed budget report that was issued on March 13th?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, Michael, you have it too?
I do. That would have been in the packet that we picked up on your porch, correct?
No, those were the original submissions. The others were after Mary made some initial cuts. That's the one we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm sure I have them here. I'll just find them while we continue on. So.
Yeah,
Okay.
It came in a separate email, Mike, from Christine.
Oh, I know I have it, but I'm going to step away because it's in another room.
I'm looking for mine as well.
Mike, you might check your emails. It came in from on a separate email from Chris.
I think it
After
was
she
right
got
after
the information from Mary.
Okay, I think what I'm going to do is grab a second computer here so that I can stay online with the meeting here and view those emails at the same time.
All right, we'll give you a few minutes to do that.
So Jim, how's the beach? Is it warm or windy?
It's usually kind of coolish out there.
Yeah. Doesn't look windy, so I guess
No,
you don't have any
no.
sea breeze.
No, this isn't a video. There's one of the pre-canned backgrounds is actually a beach, like in the Caribbean, and it's
Yep.
kind of a video. So it's actually got the palm fronds blowing and the surf coming through.
That would be a little bit too much. I did address the question to Sarah yesterday by email. And
Yes.
I noticed going through the original budget.
How's that one, Jim? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I like that one. You're showing off.
Brian's a good teacher.
Oh, I like that one better.
Yeah.
That's nice. So anyway, I asked Sarah, I noticed that some people had plugged in a 2% on their original submittals.
Yes, we had taken those out. Those had been taken out of the 313 version.
Okay. Now, I assumed that the TEU, that those steps and grade things have already been agreed to by contract?
Yes, step increases are by contract. There has been, unless Mary knows otherwise, there's been no, I am unaware of any percentage increase for the TEU at this time. So we did remove that. A couple people had put it in their original, but I did remove that out of the 313 version, as well as all of the newly requested positions. So the positions requested by the police department, the accounting department, the collector treasurer, and the school department, none of those are in those 313 numbers.
Very good, thank you.
Chris, if I can just jump in a minute, at Monday evening's executive session with the school committee,
Yes.
I asked Gordon to entertain the possibility of broaching the topic with all of the 5 bargaining units of foregoing their raises for this coming year. And he was open to at least putting the subject on the table with the bargaining units.
All right. Oh, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. I know other subjects were probably discussed, and I don't think we should pursue it at this point in time. Is that correct?
Yes, they were very amenable. It was a collegial conversation throughout. They know that big cuts need to occur.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Chris, I just had a general question on, has there been, I know we're going to wait till the last minute to get as much information on possible revenue and other situations, but is there any discussions or communications going on, and maybe this is a question also for Mary, among either town managers or selectmen or counselors within the state or with the state as to possible projected revenue impact to coronavirus, or is it so unique to every town that there's nothing being discussed about what you might make as assumptions as to how your revenue stream could be hit?
There's no uniform response, Jim. Every Tuesday for the last 3 weeks, and apparently going forward into the future, there's a statewide conference call at which the lieutenant governor gives the latest recap and then updates about thoughts that she and the governor are putting together to plan things. And then Sean Cronin from the Division of Local Services comes on and tries to help out with municipal questions. The only common answer is no one knows what to expect. They're hopeful that Congress will pass an additional stimulus, which would be directly payable to cities and towns for lost revenue. All of the COVID acts, the CARES Act, and all the congressional actions that have been taken so far are devoted solely to COVID-19 unanticipated, unbudgeted expenses and cannot be used to compensate for lost revenue. So everybody has the same question, and the answer is no one knows the answer. The state budget committee met yesterday. In fact, there was a picture of some of them in the newspaper today too, Chris. I don't know if you saw it. They're really at a loss without this new federal legislation, which may not even occur. They don't know where the money's coming from, and it makes budgeting almost impossible.
So I'm just thinking that I know we're going to start looking at the expenses and whatnot, but somewhere in our agenda for the committee, it might be worth our also looking at our revenues and making some guesses or assumptions as to how we think maybe they might be impacted, just to have some kind of guesstimate as to what that would look like. And then we could always, refine that as we learn more and things occur. But it might be worth our while to also take a stab at that, through each component to see which ones we think are going to be impacted and which, and just guessing, because we're in the dark, but I think it'd still be helpful to have some guess as to what the other side of the coin might look like.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jim. Oh, by the way, I want to thank Kathy for having done the minutes.
Yes.
Are we imposing on you again
No,
today?
no, I assume I'm doing it going forward.
Okay, thank you. In today's, in the article about Springfield, they also said that their excise revenues were down by $770,000. Obviously, if people aren't going to the dealerships and they aren't buying new cars, and the other small used car lots are closed, we're going to take a hit on the excise tax, I'm sure. So how do you feel about that, Sarah?
That makes sense. We can take a look and see where we stand right now. We had given our latest commitment for excise recently. Pretty much before all this downturn happened, we had all of the information. So if we're going to see that, it's not going to be for a couple of months before we would see it.
Right, because the excise commitments are sent out sporadically through the year.
Right, and so then it will be a January 1 kind of thing, when the RMV then sends everything. So I'm not sure how we would look it up to be able to see what that's going to be.
Yeah, there's no precedent.
No, and so I'm just trying to think of how to get any idea about it, unless, as everybody's been talking about it, and it is a topic that we aren't the only ones that wondering, then there might be some studies done on, okay, in this industry, it's a decrease of this much in sales, and then we could take that and essentially apply that to our new excise to come up with something. But that would be the only way that I can think of to come up with something.
Yes.
I'm not sure.
I agree.
It's gonna be tough.
Springfield said they had about a $300,000 loss just in building permits, so there's another area where we're gonna lose income. I don't know about licenses, other
Right.
fee for use and so forth. Do you have a feeling on that, Mary?
Well, each day when we have our department heads conference call, Kevin Duquette does indicate that he's busy.
Good.
But I don't know if that means because he's alone. I think there is some activity, but I'm sure it's diminished from prior years.
Now,
But I don't know in terms of numbers.
Now, compared to over the past couple of years, we did have a big spike of permits, and we have been slowly going down lately. We have several projects that are very large projects, so they're ongoing, so they require frequent inspections, but it's not a new permit coming out. So I'm not sure at this point, I haven't gotten to talk to Kevin yet about the kinds of applications he would typically get in the spring, because in the springtime is when he typically gets a lot.
Yeah.
But I know that the regular stuff, construction and all that, had really declined over the past couple of years. If you looked about 4 years ago, I want to say, we had 40 construction in progress. And at the end of fiscal 19, we only had 9. So we've been going down too. So some of that is already the trend that we were seeing prior to this.
So Chris, I didn't mean for you to have to devote a portion of this meeting to the revenue, because I know you wanted to go through the expenses. So
Yes.
at some point though, I think these discussions would be good to have to go through each line item of the revenue and just take a stab based on our best understanding.
Okay, Jim, I know you're well intended.
Sorry about that.
Okay, well, have you all located that budget, that amended budget area? We start from the very first page and go by the department number, 111 being town council, there's absolutely no change in that budget. I think we can forego it. As I
Agreed.
go through, please stop me if you have a question. And these are the ones we'll set aside. And
May
those you have, pardon?
I just make a suggestion?
Sure.
For the town council budget, I agree there's no changes or anything like that. I know some of the other board members for some of the other committees have offered to forego their stipends for a short period of time or reduce them. That is an idea for some savings. I'm not sure if that's something that the council will be interested in, but I did want to let you know that several other board members from other things have asked to not take their stipend right now.
Very nice offer.
It is. It's very nice.
However, I know our town council works very hard and they've got the major responsibility. So I would not, I don't think I'd even approach it with them. I don't know how the rest of the committee feels, but I know they're a hardworking bunch of people. And I think if push comes to shove and we're really up against the wall and we're looking for every nickel, then maybe we'd approach that subject. But
Yeah, I think they earn every penny and then some.
I don't have
Absolutely.
any disagreement with that, Chris.
And we would be open to, Mike and I will have that discussion after the meeting and.
We're not even asking.
No,
them to-
I understand that, but there may be some appetite to do that.
Yeah. Okay.
Sarah, just if I can still stay on town council a minute. Sarah, Jeannie and I talked about where that we could cut if necessary for next year. And we both agreed we could eliminate our travel budget. She sets a certain amount aside for conferences and such.
Right.
We there wasn't too much activity on that line item this year. So we can, if it's important that we have to be somewhere, we'll figure it out at that point.
So I have that connected with the conference itself. Do you want me to take the conferences off too?
Yes, I think for now.
Okay, and
Wait, don't take the one off if it's related to the clerks, because.
we're just talking town council budget, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'll remove that, and then I know that we have another line in there for the T-shirts for the 4th of July parade. Do you want me to remove that too, and everybody can just use current year's T-shirts?
We did that last year. We would still need at least one for this coming year, assuming we have a parade.
So do you want me to just reduce that dollar amount then, or leave it?
You know, for now, leave it. If it comes to the fact that the reality is we can't do a parade, well, we don't need that line item.
Okay, no problem. I can do that.
Okay. All right, moving on. The town manager's budget, 122. We have a total appropriation request or recommended of 211,516. There's been some reductions because of the change in personnel. We have a total decrease of minus 1.6%. So I don't think that budget is an issue.
No?
Agreed.
Do we all agree?
Yes.
All right.
I try to make it easy on you folks.
Thank you, Mary.
Yes, and you have. 132, the reserve fund, we kept the same amount as previous years, 112,000 for right now. That's a 0% change. I would leave that in there as an amount.
Yes, I strongly encourage that.
I'll say you.
I agree. I mean, on one hand, you could say, well, it's anybody's guess and you could possibly reduce it. But on the other hand, you could say this will be a challenging budget year and you may need even
Yeah.
more. So leaving it there is fine with me.
Okay. Mike, you feel the same?
I do. I think we're all on the same page as we know.
All right, 135, town accountant, total appropriation of request 332,989.90 is actually a decrease of 11.57%. And there's absolutely no change in the budget. I would say we can forego that.
It's $11.57, not percent.
Oh, I'm sorry. Change of $11.57.
So I mean, in total, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, the assessor's budget, 141. That's a pretty tight budget also. However, the overall, the requested amount is 220,472. I see that I believe they asked for more legal because of pending litigation.
Correct.
Correct.
And so they have a 0.2% increase. I think we can forego that one at this point in time for further delving into.
Agreed.
How you all say, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, collector treasurer. Total increase is 9,393.19 for a requested appropriation of 351,681. Overall increase of 2.7%.
So I was kind of on the fence with this one. 2.7 isn't outrageous, but maybe there's room to at least look it over. But I could go either way, I think.
Yeah, I'm just gonna kind of eyeball the original request.
The salaries have a 3% increase.
Yeah. The printing went up, the training seminar went up. I'm sure we could take $900 off of the training seminar and they still would have.
Are you looking at the detail budget, Chris?
Yes, I am.
Because that doesn't necessarily track to these totals, correct?
No,
Mary?
it doesn't. No,
All right.
it doesn't.
So if we had to look at them, I assume we'd be looking at a detail that tracks the numbers. in
All
the
right, then why don't we mark this one for just a little bit more further discussion?
Yeah, there may not be anything there, but
Yeah.
it'd be worth a look. Okay, I'm okay with that.
Legal services, item number 151. We have a $140,000 request. I know that Mary said that there's no change in the appropriation. So Mary, I think that was from your finding a new council. at a better hourly rate?
Yes. Initially, my thought was that we should increase this by 30, 40, $50,000 because we have several cases pending now that even though I have retained new counsel at a lesser hourly rate, we're already approximately 125,000 in the red from this current fiscal year, and we have a quarter to go. But then I thought maybe over the course of the next fiscal year, we could reduce some of that, leave it at the 140 and hopefully pay whatever the differential is from free cash next year at this time, or when fiscal 22 is about to start.
Yeah,
It's running out of control, and I wish I could put a stop to it, but the litigate, I got the impression last night from the town council that they want to proceed on on one of the matters that is in litigation that could run $30, $40, $50,000 without blinking an eye. So
if the plaintiff would lose, is there any way we could recoup the legal costs from them? No provision for that.
it's a land use litigation, so that that remedy wouldn't be available to us or to the plaintiff, so.
Yeah. Okay.
But that's why I just decided instead of putting it on the tax rate, maybe it would be better to try to monitor it during the course of the year and then make up the shortfall from free cash, assuming we have some free cash next year.
So Mary, you sound though like you're expecting that 140 is not enough.
I know as I sit here, it's not close to enough.
Yeah. I think that warrants further discussion because
I agree, because, it would be good. I see what you're saying, but it's either 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. And if we already know it's not going to be enough, perhaps we should be reflecting a little bit more closely to what you're guessing. So
yeah.
I would say if we could discuss it a little bit more.
Yeah,
Your assumption may be absolutely correct and makes sense, but maybe talk about it a little bit.
Sure.
Everybody agree to that?
I do. I think that number is probably realistically is going to be, could probably be as high as 200.
Yeah, I would guess that. And if it's a matter of not spending money elsewhere and putting that money into this pocket, I think we'd be better served, but let's have that discussion.
Right.
152, Human Resources. We have a requested budget of $239,575. It's actually a 12.1% increase. I know that right now we don't have a human resources manager. And there again, Mary, you're the one to fill us in on this, on what's anticipated. Are we thinking you're going to fill that position quickly? I know there's a great need, but how are we feeling about that?
Well, I feel like I have a foot in each camp. We desperately need the position, because the absence of a director has ripple effects throughout the town's employment community that I don't probably have to explain to any of you. In the absence of a director, your town manager is acting as the director, and that is an area about which I claim to have no super skill. I do the best I can. Currently I have a friend who's retired, who's working part-time for the town in that capacity. She's excellent. And I don't know how long she'll stay. She's under a contract that expires April 22nd. I think she'll stay as long as her husband doesn't object too strenuously, because they're both retired people. So part of me wants to just not spend the money and keep her in that role. And the other pond that I'm referring to is we need a director, and we need somebody full-time to pay full-time attention to these issues. So that's why I've asked to increase the salary, because I think the director was in there at 72,000. the last couple of years, and I will not attract a qualified full-time candidate at 72,000 for an HR director. We've also, and that's really where the bulk of the increase comes from. I think it's going from 72 to 100 in that salary estimation.
Yes.
You know, like I say, I'm really conflicted over this. I would look to your advice as to how to proceed. I mean, we can continue the patchwork. I think Elaine Grimaldi will hang in there with me. But that's a gaping hole that the town really needs to fill.
Yeah. Do we currently have an HR assistant so designated? Because,
No, we do
or is
not.
that someone to be hired?
That position was publicized and we have several applications. They were due March 31st. I wanted to fill that position. It's been vacant also for 18 months. Essentially, the only person in HR is Corinne Trangisi, who is underwater because she's the benefits coordinator and she can't keep up with her tasking. So Alex Shipman, who's the administrative assistant in the health department, gets a $50 weekly stipend because she does some of the administrative work for the HR, which is a problem because she's a union member and she's working with confidential information. So that's a whole other issue.
Yeah.
But there is no one. There is no one in that department. Elaine, as I said, she works between 12 and 18 hours a week. And we've got countless grievances. We've got countless employee situations that are problematic that haven't risen to a grievance level. We've got countless department head issues with some of the relationships intra-departmental. So that's a big problem. That's a huge issue.
All right, then I would suggest that that's a budget that we'll have to revisit and really thrash out.
Okay.
Everybody agreed?
Yes.
Well, I'd like to see that budget stay for now, and then we can revisit, as you mentioned, Chris. But I agree with Mary. Part of the cost that we've occurred over the last several years with regards to some of the litigation has been because we didn't have an HR director. So this is really a critical position for her to have and fill.
Oh, noted.
Yeah.
So I would just like to add, so if we take your suggestion, Chris, and I do, and I believe everyone else does, if there were monies available or as these funds become available, that might be a topic that would be on the top of the list to bring back or move forward with as soon as funds become available.
Okay.
Last year, if I remind everyone, I believe we were in the same situation that we did not have an HR person when we worked our budget finance committee.
Yeah.
The upside this year is that we do have Jennifer that we didn't have last year, that at least we have a physical body there that is able to help us with our needs.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just going to share my own thoughts on this. It appears to me that there may be instances where we have traditionally spent money because we've simply done it to assure that there's a continuity to replacing certain things or repairing certain things. We may need to take that money from that other department and put it towards something where we find that the lack of having personnel is costing us far more in expense.
Right.
So
I know it was the position of the Appropriations Committee before the government changed that, they felt strongly that this kind of position was needed and
yes.
made room in the budgets to try to account for it. So yeah, no argument that, having a person in that who's qualified to take that position on, I think would have a ripple effect on some of our other expenses.
Absolutely.
So yeah, definitely sympathetic, and hopefully we can do something, but talk about it more.
Okay.
If I might just add, this COVID-19 situation has truly exacerbated the lack of HR, because the CARES Act has numerous components that impact. There's a special provision now for a special FMLA. You know, the unemployment issue has been enhanced. The benefits have been enhanced. And those are all benefits that we don't have anybody to discuss other than Corinne. And she, of course, is trying to work remotely as well as everybody else. And so the regulation and the legislation, not just the COVID stuff, but everything in the HR field is becoming a litigation landmine. And we really do need competent staff there. So I guess I beat that horse to death.
Thank you,
Just
Mary.
for today.
I would just
So
like to add
Chris-
one piece here. I believe I mentioned Jennifer's name in my last conversation, and it is Elaine, obviously, that's
Right.
filling the
Yes.
spot for Mary. So
Okay.
Yeah, Chris, if I may, I'm glad that we have someone there as a stopgap, but I'm total support of Mary with regards to the need for a more permanent solution, because this really would, in my opinion, save the town money and reduce some of the potential issues going forward.
Okay, so
Great.
noted. So with that, this is up for discussion again. Next one is item 155, information technology. There's a total request of $957,632, which is an increase of $62,152, and it's a 6.9% increase. Ryan, would you like to answer this question? Is there any areas in this budget that you feel could possibly be put off to another time? I know I've looked, and there's so many things that are end of life. When I looked at your budget, and I think you also provided me with some figures as to how much is spent on the school within your budget.
Yep.
So I'm wondering if the replacement, this might lap over into capital requests, but how much of what you're requesting is reflected for the school?
So in that 957 in the operational budget, that does not include replacements or scheduled replacements, I should say.
Okay.
That's mainly just for the operations. Most of that's maintenance contracts. 321,000 of that is in maintenance contracts alone.
Oh.
You know, that's everything. That's, you know, Munis is 77,000. Our switching and some of our server infrastructure is another 45,000. Those are just some of the big ticket items. There are some new services that were added in this budget, like the part of the Munis thing we added in this budget, funding for built-in training. So this would give us 5 days of built-in training that we can use for any department, for any modules. And it also includes, I believe, 2 membership or 2 tickets to the Munis user conference, which I think are like 500 a piece anyway.
Where's that usually held?
It bounces around. This year was supposed to, actually, I think it was this week, actually. It was supposed to be in Orlando, but it got canceled, as you can imagine.
Yes.
So given the overall size of the IT budget and the increase in the non-salary, I would just say seems to me worth looking into it a little bit and understanding the component that's rising.
Okay, for further discussion.
Yes.
All agreed?
Yeah, I just want to give Ryan a little oral pat on the back here, because we wouldn't even be having this discussion if not for his skill set. So thanks, Ryan.
Exactly.
I know how hard you're working. I see it daily. And I don't mean to suggest the others don't, but
No argument there, Mary.
he's really made our lives manageable, and he's done it with ease and grace. I know I call him every day I don't know what I'll do if I don't have the chance to talk to him when this crisis is over. He's been great.
Yeah, he certainly helped me. I wouldn't be on today if it wasn't for Ryan. I'm such a
got
newbie
I
at
got
this.
great staff. That's what it really does it for me. So they make me look good.
Yeah, well, you do a good job too.
That's how it's supposed to work, Ryan.
Okay, for further discussion, town council and clerk, item number 160, actual increase is 2,000, well, it requested 228,616.89. Actual increase is $2,747. It's a 1.2% increase. I think we can forego further discussion. I know some of the changes are because we have a new clerk and we have a new personnel who was also starting at lower step. So I would say at 1.2%, we're okay on that one. All agreed?
Yes, I'd agree.
Chris, if I may, I just want to add that when I looked at this, I look at it from a very basic view, and I look for anything more than 5% or anything over or close to $4,000 or higher. And what I see is an increase in non-salary items, and I just don't know why that cost has increased so much by 15%.
Let's see.
Sarah, could some of that be copier costs and postage increased? Well, hasn't been an increase in postage, but the need to do for postage?
No, if I recall off the top of my head, it would be the general code that there were a couple of items that we
yes.
hadn't
Right.
originally budgeted for, and so it was to finish up those couple
Yep,
of items.
there
If
it
I
is.
recall, that's the
Okay.
majority.
That's it exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's general
Kind of a
code.
one-time expense.
Right,
Tom.
we hadn't anticipated some of the, or the bylaw committee had, in order to do what needs to be done to get that product the way it should look, there were some unanticipated costs, so.
Okay, all
that's
right.
what it is.
Yes, I see that right off the bat. Tech software support, general code annual maintenance fee of $1,000. That's going to go to IT, so that's already come out of that budget.
Yeah, but if you look further down, Chris, in the
Yeah.
58 something.
Yeah,
50, right around
50%
there.
to general code due upon completion of product, 4,910. Yeah,
That's it.
okay. So does that answer the question, Tom?
Yes,
Okay. So I think we can forego that budget. Elections, again, this year, we're going to get hit with a presidential election. I think there's 4 elections this year, Sarah?
Yes.
Right. Yeah. So it's a 43% increase, and the expense is going, the annual expense is going from 28,000 to 40,515, which is actually an increase of 12,176, but that's something that can't be avoided. It's mandated.
Right, so it's going from 3 elections to 4 possible elections
Yeah.
in the budget. And that includes, therefore, the police details needed for it, the coding for the ballot boxes, the ballots themselves, all of that, the election workers themselves, and then we feed them because they're there all day. So
Right.
it includes all of that.
right.
I have a comment, Chris.
We had, we talked about this in the council meeting last night, and part of what we've been discussing is the need at this current time with this pandemic to reduce the polling hours, which would reduce the cost.
Absolutely.
So we see that as a potential going forward, if we even hold a physical election, assuming that we have the ability to do that and still keep our distance.
But that could be offset by the spike in requests for an absentee or a straight mail-in ballot. Actually, absentee is the mail-in ballot.
Right.
And they've apparently lifted the restrictions around what you can claim for why you want to be absentee. I think it's just going to be, if you want one, you get one. So there may be some increased, and I would, you know, if it were held tomorrow, you can imagine how many people will be asking for a mail-in ballot.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Kathy, but just on a very high level, if we reduce the hours, and that's 40
Oh,
current
yes,
workers,
I'm not saying that.
the cost is far offset.
Right.
Is that something that is doable according to state law
Yes,
to
What's
reduce
that?
polling?
Yes, Jeannie has received her guidance directly from what all the other clerks are doing. And there's Mary, I can't remember the number of the act, but chapter 53 of the recent acts.
Yeah.
And it covers the opportunity to push out tax deadlines and
Oh, yeah, the
hold
whole,
elections and, you know, how to remotely
Abatements and-
manage your business.
Okay.
right. I think, Chris, this might be a question for Mary to address with Jeannie, to see if there's any way we can do a reduction. I mean, when you look at that, those are, I mean, understandably, we do have more elections, but if we're going to do reduced poll hours, what that impact might be, because we could be talking thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
It's not nickels and dimes.
Yeah, but the other thing is, we'll have reduced hours for June 2nd, but that's in this year's budget. It could very well be by the state primary of September 1 or 2, whatever it is, and the federal election, that we might be business as usual, whatever that now will look like.
Yeah.
And so then those numbers won't change.
Mhm.
Right, so we leave it and then we hope for the best. And then if it doesn't, if it doesn't pan out, we can't save money, the money's there, but we can recoup that money.
If it goes to a different form of voting
Right,
Exactly.
or format,
Okay.
right?
Right, or it could
I
even
don't
be
think it's
to
anything-
offset.
It's as the circumstance comes up. We know we need to have it at this point in time, so I say no further discussion until something changes.
Right.
okay.
All right, item 175, planning, zoning, and conservation. Total request was 162,756, which was an increase of 9,517 overall, which was a 62.2% increase overall. And as Mary advised us, at this point in time, we don't have a director. And I imagine we could leave money in the budget because looks like there's a 3.8% increase in the salary items, which I think could be adjusted downward at this point in time.
oh, yeah, definitely. We can leave that position vacant for a short while. I'm in conversation with the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission to see if we can get sort of an ad hoc planning director who will just assist as necessary, and then have the planning board members and the conservation commission members take a larger role in managing their respective agendas. Bethany Yao right now is the only person in the department, and she's performed admirably over the last couple of weeks, and certainly before that. So she may need a stipend of some sort, I think, in to be equitable with her. But this whole budget is, I think we need to keep the director's salary at some level just to have a place from which to pay whatever assistance we get. But we might need to talk about this department a little bit more later on.
Yes, I think
So
there might
mark
be some
down.
reductions.
Mhm.
Yeah. Per the TEU contract, she would be eligible for a stipend after 30 days at performing the higher duty.
Yeah. Well, it's not really a higher duty. It's just,
A more-
well, I guess in a manner of speaking it is, but we'll work that out. But thanks. We'll work on that.
Yeah. Let me know if you need any help.
Okay.
Okay. So that one will be up for further discussion at some point in time? Or do we want to say Well, I think Mary, if Mary's going to discuss giving some kind of stipend, that would be in the current budget. As we get closer to the month of June, we'd know better.
Right,
You agree?
yes.
All right. I'll put that for further discussion, only because of that circumstance. We have item number 947, which seems like we're jumping around, but we're not, which is the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission's assessment for this year, which went from 2,600 to 2,800, which is just shy of a $200 increase at a 7.7%. Not much we can do about that. We belong to the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission.
Right.
So that has to be accepted. All agreed?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Begrudgingly, the 7.7 seems to be a little bit of an insult, but it's
Yeah,
such,
with the increase.
such a minor amount. It's
I
not
know. When you
worth harping about.
$199.75. And they have provided resources for it, and obviously we're going to need them to give us a hand here as well. So, all right, so the general government, in spite of it all, we have a total request for general government is $3,044,049, which is $119,000, which is a 4.1% increase. So obviously those things that we flagged are going to need further discussion to bring that percentage down. I'd like to see us in the 2.5% range for increases, just because of the pandemic and what's been going on. And if we start losing revenues, we're definitely going to have to make some cuts in that regard. So the ones we flagged for discussion will be the ones that we will take up at another time. Are we ready to go on from general government to public safety?
Yes.
Fine with me.
Okay, item 210, police. We have a request for $2,957,638, a total increase of $122,430, 4.3% increase. There was a decrease in the non-salary items, but an increase in the salary items. I don't believe there were any new officers. Are any of the council members aware of that? We have any new?
In this past year or going forward for July?
Going forward.
I've removed any new positions that were requested.
Right.
There were none?
I removed them.
Oh, you removed them.
And
Okay.
did Sarah, when you did that include, Jeff have anybody going to the academy? Do we know that? Did he
No,
plan for that? Okay.
no, we thought he might, but two of his injured officers have decided to return to work and have been cleared to do so, so he won't be.
Oh, good.
I could
He
also
did send me something, just so you know, that just in the last couple of days with some deductions, and I haven't consolidated them anywhere. So he's trying to make some cuts in his budget, but I don't have them available to give to you right at the moment.
For
All
some
right.
reason, I can't seem to find my police department budget, but
I could add one piece of information too. There were a couple officers that were marked up for retirement that rescinded their positions and decided to stay on a little bit longer. So that changed a little bit of the position regarding sending people through the academy.
Yeah, that would make a difference. Of
so
course,
if there's no new officers, the 4.7% increase in salary, is that like steps or
I think it's a combination of contract, Quinn bill.
Yeah. Longevity or they get certain steps for certain types of training, don't they, Mike?
Yes, they do.
Yes.
Quinn bill,
So-
they-
so
And
standing,
Quinn bill is big.
so standing in place, we absorb almost a 5% increase. That's interesting. I mean, I would mark this down. I would like to see the little detail to it just to understand how that works. But for some reason, I can't find it in my packet. I go right to the fire department, but.
We'll get you another copy, Jim.
Yeah, thanks.
And as I said, that some of what Jeff sent me in the last couple days might help reduce that.
Now, are the crossing guards taken out of this budget already?
They probably are not, but they're going to be laid off or furloughed next week. So they'll be out of the fiscal 20 balance, and I don't expect they'll be back in 21 until, well, at some lesser sum if school opens in the fall.
Okay.
So our crossing guards, are they characterized as paraprofessionals then?
No, they're actually under the police budget, I believe, aren't
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. We have, on the full-time salaries, there was a 6% contractual increase, a COLA and a step increase. So that, evidently that contract is settled.
Well, it's still in its midterm. I think it expires next June of 21.
Okay, so this is still part of it. Evidently repairs on vehicles is up 13%. That's what I can see from the detailed budget that I have a copy of.
Yeah, I have some insight into that, and I understand it. The new vehicles were not ordered in a timely manner. So the older vehicles were still in service and they required more maintenance.
Didn't that happen last year as well? That when we had gone through the financial committee, Chris, a couple of the cruisers that had been authorized in the previous year's budget hadn't yet been purchased.
Yeah, and it happened again this year in the
That's what it sounds like.
Yes.
Why is that? Why didn't Jeff go ahead with that? Was there some impediment that we don't know about? Sarah, do you know anything about it?
Well, one of the things that came up this year with the cruisers, we were looking into using combis and trying to get state contract pricing.
Yes.
And then there were a lot of questions, especially that I had, concerning the upfitting of the cruisers is a separate thing compared to the purchase of the cruisers. And so just trying to make sure that then we were doing everything we were supposed to, getting the information. So there was a delay in it. And then once all that was cleared up, then we had the COVID thing happen. So Jeff had said that at this time he was waiting to see if it would be better to turn back the money before purchasing. So he has not continued on.
Okay. Now, the purchase of the cruisers was under capital expense?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so that money would go into free cash if it's not spent.
Correct.
Correct.
I thought he put one in his operating budget usually, no?
No, it's always in the capital. He applies for that. So the last one, he was authorized for 2. He purchased 1. It's the second one that he hasn't purchased yet. And it was the upfitting of that first one that he was finishing. And then there's always a several months delay in getting the vehicles anyway. So if he doesn't spend the money, it sits there unless the project is told to be turned back and to close it. It doesn't just automatically close at the end of the year. But yes, if the money was returned, then it would go into free cash ultimately.
Okay, and then we would reappropriate from this year.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
All right.
One quick.
In order for you to look at it, Jim, I think this is when we can certainly revisit.
Yes.
Further discussion?
I brought up the subject of crossing guards, and it is under 511, and they're looking at a 1% increase. Just point of information so that when we revisit this this category, that we know it is there.
Okay. So there will be some savings, and depending on what Jeff sent to Mary, maybe at the next meeting she can advise us.
Yeah, I'll put that together as soon as I can.
Sure. No pressure.
Thank you.
Item 220, fire. There again, we have a total request of $1,804,375, which is actually a reduction of $21,393, which is a minus 1.2%. And I think that's from moving things around,
That's right.
ambulance fund and so forth.
Yes, and he's got a plan, like the police chief. Paul has sent me some notes that I've not yet put together, further reducing his budget by moving more operating expenses into the ambulance fund.
Ah, okay.
So he can cut that a little bit more.
Yeah,
And he's willing, I think he told me, memory serves me right, one of the paramedics he was thinking of hiring, he'll defer that for some indeterminate period. Don't hold me to that, but I'll check his notes to me, but because they're here somewhere.
Okay.
Paul is in attendance. If you do want to hear from him, I can promote him to be able to speak.
Oh, beautiful.
Bring them on.
It'll be a nice surprise for him.
Hello.
Hi, Paul.
Good morning,
Hi.
Paul.
I was just listening in the background. Thanks, Ryan.
We're friends for, right?
I know.
How you doing, Chief?
So I guess, what can I answer?
Well, Paul, I was just mentioning that you had given me some notes in the last couple days about how you might be able to further reduce your budget by moving some other things to the ambulance account, but I haven't sort of consolidated all those email informations from you and from some others. So I wanted Chris and the other members of the committee to know that there may be further reductions in your budget.
Yeah. So my original request, the fire budget is that down about 21,001 and change percent.
Yeah.
My EMS budget, which is all revenue that is earned this year, was I moved one of my paramedics over, moved a lot of the other educational stuff over and some supplies, increased those numbers based on our number of runs. But I was also requesting to hire one paramedic in July to get all my groups at the same level. Right now I have one group shy, a firefighter, a paramedic, and then hire another one in January to work a swing shift. After Mary sent out the email looking for ways, I looked at the numbers, and I would defer hiring the firefighter paramedic in January and move another firefighter off of the firefighter's salary item in the fire account to the EMS side, because I mean they do work both, so ultimately the EMS side can pay for it. And I forgot what the exact number was, but it was about a 5% decrease on my current budget. But ultimately, I'd still like to hire that firefighter in the future. If I'd have to defer it for 6 months, I'll defer it for 6 months. And there's potential that our income will be higher than where I budgeted for. We don't need to. We can budget for what is approved, what we've earned when you guys vote on, when the council votes on the budget. So that might allow us to move more money out of the fire side into the EMS budget, ambulance budget, to save even more money.
Great.
And Paul, can we defer some of the, or submit some of the EMS expenses
To
our fire department for COVID reimbursement through MEMA? or something?
I plan on it. My overtime is right now is out
Yeah.
of control.
Yeah.
And we're tracking that to the penny. We are getting, it's a Medicare, part of the CARES Act. We should be getting any day now $18,000 into that account that's specifically for COVID response, which I can justify either the equipment, the supplies that were purchased for the ambulance, or the overtime that I've been paying. But there's going to be a bigger submittal for reimbursement also to try and soften our blow on that budget.
Right. So my point being that therefore the revenue in the ambulance account would still be intact, at least to the extent that we can submit some of it through the COVID reimbursement.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Excellent. Great thinking, Chief, that you did. That's one of the bright things we've heard today.
So this would
We're
be,
trying to make it worthwhile. Yeah.
Yeah,
this would be the unusual case of maybe revisiting the budget because of more good news.
Right.
yes.
Yeah.
Ah, very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
It's always good to get some good news, isn't it?
Yep.
No kidding.
Okay, 241 building. Salary is let's see. $260,512 is the request. Overall increase of $29,393, 12.7% increase. Why do we have that? Was that last year we approved a part-time person going to full-time?
Yep. And that's what happened. We have he now has two full-time, or is it 1.5, Sarah? Do you know offhand?
Yes, so he now has 2 full-time people, and in the fiscal 21 budget, it was budgeted for only 6 months from January to June. So in the fiscal 21, it's now a full year's worth for that second person.
Okay,
Mhm.
and all right. Monthly stipends for,
Oh, he's got his inspectors that are paid sort of
Right.
per diem or per job, per hour.
yeah. Yeah, out of that whole budget, 248,000 is actually personnel. Out of the 260,000.
Well, his department's one that, well, like every department, it's nothing special about building, but when we talk about where to cut, I feel bad for Kevin because he's been struggling for a long time with less assistance than he needs, and now he's finally got it, and I feel like I'm gonna have to take it away from him.
But it's a funny situation. I mean, as I recall our discussion about this budget last year, I think we thought that the additional people would almost pay for themselves in inspection revenue, but it just didn't go to the same place. It goes to the general fund. Although, on the other hand, with this COVID-19 going on, I would suspect that the number of required inspections and other things will not be quite as voluminous as last year. But I thought that's how it worked. I thought that's how we kind of justified
Yes, we
putting it
did.
in.
Yeah.
Because
Is
of the
that still the
revenue.
case? But if you pay them and they don't have the inspections, you basically have the cost. Would that be correct as well?
Well, I think the inspectors are just paid by the job. The staff, his administrative staff is there
Plumbing,
regardless.
electrical, yes.
Well, I think I think as I recall the argument, and thank you for mentioning that, it was the administrative help that we added to free Kevin up
Right.
to go out and do the revenue generating
Yes,
stuff.
yes.
So,
We did that so we could enable our building inspector to be able to get out on the road and do his job rather than sit there doing it.
Yeah, I remember recall as you do, Jim, the reason we opted to move that position forward, which is only one of a few that we did, was due to the fact that it's a revenue generating resource
right.
for the town. And I think it still is to some degree. And I hate to see us cut that position at this point.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of caused this or went along with it. My only question would be is if the level of, work in terms of going out and being able to generate that revenue falls off substantially enough to, not make that kind of economic sense, then maybe you wind up having to defer it a little bit for a while until things pick up again. But so that would be my only
Yeah,
question.
and Mary, has that position already been filled though? Or is that
Oh, yes.
person?
Yes.
Yeah,
She's,
so we
doing
would
a
be
great
talking
job.
about removing a position or a person currently working in a furlough situation, sort of.
Yes, she'd be part of that overall plan. One other, though, I guess two things are on my mind. Maybe Kevin could provide the detail about the level or the numbers of inspections he is doing, and he'd be in the best position to indicate whether the levels have fallen off, regardless of where the revenue's going. And secondly, and again, it's an intangible that I have to be mindful of, is that with the planning department director being vacant, Kevin has offered quite graciously to have himself and his staff, Maureen and I forget the other lady's name as I sit here, assist Bethany, because planning and building, work so closely on many of the applications and petitions and so forth. So he's providing that service, which is, as I say, it's kind of an intangible, but it's real benefit. So if those positions in his office are supporting that, it would be a consideration that I'd ask you to think of.
That makes sense.
Yep.
Just to clarify, just so you're not expecting, but the majority of the inspectors, they receive a stipend for what they're doing. It's only the alternates that we have that are on a per inspection basis, but pretty much everybody else, it's based on a stipend for it, regardless if they have 100 inspections to do or 2 that week. And it doesn't matter what time of day it is. So if it's in the middle of the night, it's in the middle of the night.
Mm.
I think it's a good idea, Mary, that, like you say, Kevin could probably shed some light on this, and maybe we can find some areas that just reducing that increase of 12.7%. I too feel we can't provide him the support and then take it away. There may be other areas of his budget, although very small. His non-salary line items are like 11,800. So I think it would do us well just to have Kevin talk with us. So we'll do that at some future point. So I'm going to mark that for revisiting.
Okay.
Next item is everybody in agreement? I shouldn't just say we're going to do it.
I am.
I'm in favor of having a brief conversation with Kevin as well.
I'm reluctant to do anything with the position that is in there, and a discussion wouldn't help or wouldn't hurt. I mean,
Yes,
So-
okay, good. 299 dispatch, and this is Westcomb. Mary has plugged in 125,000. I think she gave us some idea of what was going on with that, hoping that it would be our fee to enter and with the grants and so forth. But as with everything with COVID, that's our entrance into that may be delayed. So for right now, we have the 125,000 in there. I feel as though we should leave it there for the moment, and probably that's a discussion to be held as we get closer to finalizing a budget.
Mhm.
What
The
say
only
you?
information I can add to that, Chris, is I did speak with the director of Westcom, asking her if COVID was delaying any of the grant applications or reviews. And she said that the development grant that was the deadline for which was April 1st has been extended to May 1st, which suggests that the award of those grants would go from September to October. But we're still planning on a July 1st switchover date. And the 125 is our annual assessment. So worst case scenario, that's what it would cost us if we can in fact get there for July 1. And I'm under the impression that all systems are still go for that turnover date.
Very good. Okay, well, we'll talk about that as things change because that's in flux. So grand total on public safety as a group, 5,147,526. Overall decrease of 77,598, but with further reductions to be calculated. Thanks to the fire chief and the police chief trying to find areas of reduction. So I think we've done a pretty good job. What's your feeling? Do you want to continue, gentlemen and ladies? Another half hour or so?
Sure.
Okay, good.
Just for my minutes here, are we revisiting dispatch or leaving it as is because it's worst case scenario?
I think we will revisit it,
Okay.
but come perhaps June
Fine.
with everything
Got
in the state of flux. Okay. Public health, 519 Health Department. We have a request for 316,913. Was a total increase of 13,156, which appears to be mainly in the non-salary items, which is a total increase of 4.3%. I'm looking here.
I believe that's due to the landfill.
Pardon?
I believe that's due to the landfill.
Oh,
The Allen Street capping or closure, whatever.
Yeah,
The monitoring.
Chris, I
Yeah.
believe that's something we need to revisit because in talking with other communities who are also in the same, well, I'll call it boat that we are,
yeah.
many of them have been cutting back, and especially with this pandemic, I don't think the state's going to require them to be as aggressive in addressing these issues.
In the coming year, right?
Yeah, so I think there's an opportunity there to recoup or reduce some of those funds.
Yeah, if I understand, there was a substantial amount of money going towards that landfill.
There was.
Yeah.
The cost to be able to do for the new landfill is in the capital budget. The
Right.
costs in this are the maintaining, like the monitoring at the fire station and all of those kinds of things. So I don't think we'll see as big of a reduction as we will in the capital, but it's definitely worth looking at.
So there's that one item, Sarah, that says other, 5382 other purchase services, which has like a whole basket full of different annual expenses coming up to 15,003 over and above last year's budget. So I guess it's kind of hard. I'm not sure some of the explanation is cut off in terms of what it is and why each one of these little components are going up, so that in total it's up that 15,000. I think I'd just like to understand those components. So I would argue maybe to look at this so we can better understand it.
Right.
You
I
know,
mean,
Sarah,
The health
is-
department's going to be under a lot of pressure with this COVID, and I'm sure they have been under a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
But some of these things may not be related to that.
is that where the Republic expense is in that line that Jim's referring to?
No,
No.
that line's where we have the mosquito stuff,
Right,
I believe it's
some
the
other
vaccines, things like that.
See that, yeah.
The tie-in bond for the landfill and all of that, but I can email all of you this one in Excel so you can see the full description without it getting cut off. So I'll do that to help you. So then when you go to further discuss it, at least you were able to read all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure Amy will be more than happy to explain in enormous detail every cent.
She does such a good job at that, though.
It's
So-
amazing. It is
so-
amazing.
Takes such great pride and pleasure in her work.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, there may be some small areas, for instance, travel and hotel expense of 800. I mean, this is like looking for pennies, but still they may, it may be worth it. All right, let's take the opportunity to talk with Amy then. Okay. Now we get into a biggie, Public Works, which is broken down into different sections. Administration and Highway total is 1,808,734 for a total reduction of 73,658, which is a percentage decrease of 3.9%. I think we'd accept that.
Well, Chris, if I may,
Yeah.
things that always raise red flags with me are not only increases, but decreases of substantial amounts of percentages or amounts that are over $5,000. And I think that falls into that category. According to this, it's decreased by 9.7% for a total of 50,572. I'd like more detail on why.
Okay,
If I may, I can share some light on that.
please do.
So one of the things is that since this will be the second year of the stormwater, the DPW department is putting some of their administrative time to the Stormwater Enterprise Fund. So in current year fiscal 20, it was just the one foreman, and now there's some administrative time, which therefore reduces all of the budgets that you see actually on the general fund side and even on the water and sewer, because it's one person divided now multiple ways instead of
Yeah,
however
and he
many we
did that
work.
with every division, didn't he? Move to where he could, like Paul was doing with the ambulance. Wasn't Bruce moving many
He did
positions?
move some, but it was one position and I think a half of another one. And then the uniforms, they were able to look at them more closely, and they're dividing them now by the actual people in those different divisions. Before it was a set allocation, and most of that was paid in the 421, which is the admin department, because that's what it was originally. And for fiscal 21, we'll be separating it by literally whoever works in there. So water has 4 full-time people, plus it has, the admin. So it's just whatever those full-time people have, not just an allocation of it. So
Right.
that did result in a ripple effect over all the uniforms. When I added it up, and I think it was like a $60 increase overall, something like that in uniforms, once you add up all of the divisions.
Right, so what we're doing is we're moving personnel into the revolving funds
Enterprise.
areas. Okay, so that's not an increase in any kind of taxation. That's monies that are available through these other funding sources.
Through the
Right,
fee.
so it's a decrease in taxation and being offset by those fees, yes.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to move on to 422, Building Facilities and Maintenance. Again, the total is 883,259. The increase is $14,172, 1.6% increase. I'm sure some of that includes the school maintenance. 423, Snow and Ice, no change at all. Requesting an appropriation of $148,172. So for those three, it seems like, I'm sure you're going to want to talk with Bruce at some point in time, but it seems as though he's done a reasonably good job of that.
Yep.
429, Utilities, gas, electric, and oil, with no salaries involved. There is an increase of 14,800, which is an increase of 1.3%. Utilities costing his projection 1,112,800.
If I may, Chris,
Yes.
this is a question for Mary. Mary, and with the things that you had to address this past year with regards to those utilities, is this a true reflection on what it may cost us, or are we going to end up in the same boat later on?
No, I think Bruce's figures are as accurate an estimate as he can provide. The situation last year was really just an oversight of, you know, the bill that we had to deal with, that we ended up with that compromise, is reflected in these numbers as well. So that because there was never an issue about the commodity and the cost that
Right.
should have been billed to us. So I think it's, I don't know, that's kind of a convoluted answer to a simple question, but I think the utility costs are in line with what Bruce is estimating here.
Okay, thank you.
I just had a question, Mary, do you think the town will benefit by the drop in the oil prices, et cetera, in terms of what it might translate into for, you know, fuel costs?
Well, I think most of our buildings are heated with gas. Whether or not the oil drop will have an effect long-term. I mean, short-term it might, just because, like, for example, I don't think Bruce has calculated that in, nor had I, frankly. But it should, if it lasts a long time, we should see some benefit from it.
With buildings currently closed, I would anticipate there might be some savings on utilities this year in the current fiscal year.
Yeah. Yeah.
There again.
But you know what? I was in my office yesterday and it was hot as blazes. So the building's been closed for a month. And although I like it hot, it was a little warm. So I think that the heat's not been adjusted in the town hall. I'll talk with Bruce. And by the way, counselors, I did speak with him this morning on the staffing issue, and you're quite correct. And we're going to include those guys in our next conversation about payroll and staffing and so forth.
Thank you, Mary.
Good, thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Okay, the next is trash collection.
Sorry,
which
did you want further review for utilities? I'm sorry.
Well,
We're
Maybe
good.
near the
on the
end.
utilities, we had a 1.3%. I think overall, we probably will speak with Bruce, but I think he's done a very good job so far on his budget.
Yes.
Especially with that, you know, being able to transfer some expenses and salaries to the Stormwater Enterprise Fund. So I think we'll just go through this and probably touch bases with him, because has he gotten back to you, Mary, with any possible reductions in his budget?
I have a meeting with Bruce on Friday morning to discuss those things.
All right, very good.
No, not yet.
So trash collection is going up from 1,088,237 to 1,150,900, which is a $62,662 increase, which is a 5.8%. And we all know that trash and recycling are going to be a problem in our budgets.
And
for the coming year.
I think it's in recycling, if I remember, we're
Yeah.
going to $93 a ton
Yes.
from very little expense there. So
Yeah.
that's out of our, sadly, it's out of our control.
Yeah, yeah.
How much of the trash expense is offset by revenue, the bag sales and that sort of thing?
The bag sales go to the revolving fund, the solid waste revolving fund, and that is the fund that we use to purchase all the carts for everybody. So we got a grant, and what the grant didn't cover, we used to offset all of those. So we have been using that to put back into the community.
But that revenue on an ongoing basis, a portion of it doesn't go to offset this trash collection expense?
No, the town council or the finance subcommittee can suggest to the town council to do a transfer from the revolving fund into the general fund to essentially to offset some of those expenses, you could do that. And if you recall, when it was under the old form of government, that we did do that a couple of times. But we haven't done that in a few years because we were building up the balance for these other purposes relating to it, increasing the recycling program, thereby reducing all of the trash, and then purchasing all of these bins.
Just for this item, Sarah, can we get what that current balance is in that fund?
Sure, if you give me a moment, I can do it right now, but you can continue talking while I pull it up.
There's a lot of moving parts on the trash collection. You know, Republic is probably a dirty word for most people who live in East Long Meadow. I know there's been a lot of complaints. We contemplated going with a different provider, but the cost was $120,000 more per year to change, and we didn't think it was appropriate. That combined with the new fee for recycling. However, there is a formula by which we might get some of that $93.50 back, depending on the content of our recycling. Just an awful lot of moving parts, and none of them result in a good net. Amy's the one that's got all the detail on this as well, even though it's in the DPW budget. But I'm sure that when we schedule time to talk with her on the other health department issues, she can elaborate on some of this. And just for your edification, Republic has already solicited a substantial increase starting July 1 based on the fact that their contract goes back to 2010 and has been extended and several times in that intervening 10-year period. But East Long Meadow now has something like 1,000 more residences from which trash is collected than it had at the time of the initial contract. And therefore, they're looking for an increase, which, you know, it would be equitable, and there's contract language that suggests that they're entitled to it. And there's also been changes in the Prevailing Wage Act that causes an increase in their labor, and they're looking for the town to make a contribution to that. So we're in the middle of negotiating with them on that issue as well to try to not increase the cost of this any more than it already will go up, just so you know. So
Currently, the balance is 58,000, but that is my preliminary number right now, without double checking whether we've finished paying the final invoices for all of those carts, or received all the reimbursement for it either, because we were getting both. And then that is also the funds that we pay the recycling coordinator's salary out of, her part-time salary.
Okay.
So Tom, no benefits, because I know that's usually a follow-up question.
Right, thank you.
Through the chair, Chris,
Yeah.
I'd just like to respond to Jim. Jim was talking about revenue possibly created from the purchase of green bags. I would expect to see probably a decline in that revenue based on the town, I believe, is either giving those bags away free right now, or people have the option of bringing extra trash up to the DPW and use a free dumpster for an unlimited amount of time.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that, I think the availability of the extra household trash is going to cut down on the sale of the bags. And as Sarah just informed us, if we have, you know, have to give something to the recycling coordinators, then some of that money is already planned on. The expenditure of that money has been planned.
Right. And we can use that revolving fund for this trash increase. We most likely can use some of that to help us offset, depending how much this is, because I'm not sure how much this is going to be. I see Mary smiling.
No, I'm laughing. Ryan just sent me a text.
Oh, but that we can, that we possibly can use that to help with the general fund deficit that we might have this year, to use some of that revolving fund. So I think it would be a bit premature to assume that we could take a lot or that whole thing at this point.
Yeah. Just so to clarify in my own mind, Mary, so this trash collection amount that's in here that shows a $62,663 increase, the 1,150,000 is just is that a plug-in figure because negotiations are going on?
Yes, I think that's what they did because we were uncertain when the budget was due.
Okay.
And that may change too. I'm sorry if I was a bit distracted there because I lost my screen. That's what Ryan was texting me about. Whole issue with having town residents be able to go to the transfer station for no cost was in response to Republic's solicitation for an immediate increase based on the number of people at home and the increase in volume. So we've asked them to suspend collection at all the town buildings unless they're called to do so. And also they unilaterally have suspended pickups of yard waste and things like that I think were also done by special request from the residents to them. So some of these are accommodations that are made on the fly to try to find where we can keep contract costs down and be fair to our vendors and yet not have costs go through the roof. So all of that's still being discussed, and just got an email this morning from Frank Antonacci from US Hauling, who was one of the other competitors on this new bid, but they were like $250,000 higher, but their technology's better and their systems are better. And, so again, it's just another one of those topics that remains in flux, but we're stuck with Republic. Well, not stuck with them. I shouldn't say it. Let me retract that. We're committed to them and they maintain that they're committed to us for the foreseeable future. So.
Okay, so to be determined.
To be determined.
Okay. And 433 is item waste collection. So that had a total request of 87,372 with an increase of 17,891. And that's an increase of 25.8. What is the difference between the trash collection and the waste collection?
The waste collection, this 433, that is the transfer station itself. So we pay for the transfer station attendants out of there, and then as you know, it's a transfer station. So we have to then remove the waste from there. So all of those items. Now, the past 2 years, maybe 3 years, this could be the third year, that that fund has actually run short. And so we've had to offset it with, sorry, we want to sing now. So we've had to offset it with turnbacks from other departments. So Bruce actually made it what it should cost and what it will cost. And I agree with his estimate that that's what it will cost prior to any COVID-related possible increases.
Ah,
So we run it at a deficit. So,
Yes,
The
it is on the
fees
list of deficits right now.
and this is all the expenses, the fees that the townspeople pay for like dropping off a TV or something like that, that's just a pass through to wherever we're wind up dumping those things.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
The fees that residents pay to drop off items like, monitors, TVs, that sort of air conditioners. Is that just a pass through to wherever the town is dumping those things? So there's really no revenue that the transfer station generates?
The revenue that the transfer station generates goes into the general fund. It's one of the other miscellaneous revenues that we collect. So it essentially does offset that. Now, whether or not the fee for a monitor is say $25 and it costs us $25, that's really a question for Bruce, because I don't look at them to see item by item to see if it would cover all of those. We can pull what their total revenue has been, and I can provide that for you for the next meeting, to give you an idea as to how we're doing on that revenue, and you can see whether that would essentially offset the expenses.
I mean, I would be interested to see that, just
No problem.
to know, kind of like on the same vein as the building inspector, you know, you're getting more expense, but does that mean the general fund is experiencing more revenue that's
Right.
coming that way?
Yeah. So overall, under Public Works, we have a request for $5,191,237, which overall is an increase of $35,868, or a percentage increase of the 0.7%. But I'm sure we want further discussion on some of these items. What say you all?
Yes, I agree with Jim.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay. Do we want to try to get through all this? We were almost at 11:45, or do we want to set some of these aside? There may be some, we have education next, and library, recreation, council on aging, human services, insurances. I
There's
think
quite
we've
a
done
bit to
quite a bit
go.
of work this
Yeah.
morning. Shall we pick up at education next week?
I think that makes sense.
Okay.
Would agree.
Yeah, until we finish the rest of these, we won't ask the department heads to join us. And we'll go through there, and
The only thing I might ask is, since the detailed budgets we have don't necessarily reflect the numbers in the summary that we're using,
yeah.
have they? Sorry, had my phone connected to the computer, and I got a phone call, and it kind of like lost the whole screen. So I lost my train of thought. So for the budgets that we've identified that we'd like to talk to the department heads about,
Yes.
will they be providing us detailed budgets that coincide or correspond with the numbers in the summary? I guess is my question.
I can provide those to you.
Okay.
So I had done the adjustments based on my discussions with Mary, and I did that just at the high level on my master sheet and not into each department, because I knew we would have further cuts. So it's almost 70 budgets, so I don't want to play with them too many times.
So just for the
So
ones
I will give you all the ones that you wanted for further discussion, and I will send those to you so they match what this summary is that you're looking at, and we will go from there.
And Chris, I mean, we just need them before we talk to
Yes.
talk to those individuals. Okay.
So once those departments are scheduled for interviews with us, then it would be
Okay.
nice to get that particular budget.
Okay,
Okay, thanks, Sarah.
you're welcome.
All right, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Oh, before we do that, sorry, do you want to approve Kathleen's minutes
Minutes?
from the last?
Yes. In fact, that was one of the things I had, but we were all kind of chatting beforehand. Yes. Did everybody get a copy of the minutes?
I did.
I did.
I would make a motion to approve the minutes of last week's meeting.
Yeah.
Do I have a
No
second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you,
Move to adjourn.
everyone. We'll see you next Wednesday.
Great. Thank you, Christine.
Thanks,
Okay.
everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you
you
all.
all.
Okay, good night. I mean, good day.
That was last night, yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.